Hi, we're sisters Elaine and Brenda.
Welcome to the Body Wealth Podcast, a space for conversation about the wealth that really matters.
Your best health. Hi, Ricki. It's so good to see you. Thank you for joining us on the Body Wealth Podcast. How are you doing today?
I am great. It's so great to be here. We've been talking about this for a while, so it's finally here. I'm so excited to talk to you guys. You guys are so beautiful. I love what you do.
Thank you. We want to give you a second to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, and please tell them a little bit about the work that you're doing with the Touch Black Breast Cancer Alliance.
Sure. So my name is Ricki Fairley, and I will be a 13-year survivor of triple negative breast cancer tomorrow. So I'm very blessed to be here. I'll give you a little bit of snapshot of my story. So I was diagnosed with stage 3A triple negative breast cancer. And triple negative breast cancer, there are several types. It's the worst one. It has the highest mortality rate. It's the most aggressive. Black women get it at 3 times the rate of white women, and we don't really know why. And it's the only breast cancer subtype that does not have a drug to prevent recurrence. So now you have to take something for 5 years, for 10 years, we don't have a drug. And we really only have 2 targeted drugs for our disease right now. It's the worst one. And so I had that. I had a double mastectomy, and then I did 6 rounds of very aggressive chemo, one of them being the red devil that you may have heard people talk about. I did radiation, and then my doctor said, okay, you're okay for the moment. Come back in 2 months to get a scan. So I went back in 2 months to get a scan, and they found 5 spots on my chest wall. So my doctor said, okay, Ricki, you're now metastatic. I don't have any more drugs for you. So you should get your affairs in order, and you probably have about 2 years.
Wow.
And I said, I can't really die right now. I have a daughter in college at Dartmouth. I got to pay tuition. Like, what are we going to do? Me, you, and God, we got to work this out. What have you got for me? And she really didn't know what she was doing. She'd only had 2 cases of triple negative breast cancer, and both of them died in 9 months. So I went to Dr. Google. Finally, on the 3rd or 4th page, I found the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation, which had been around for about 5 years then. And so I called them, my now dear friend, Haley Dinnerman, and she said, I'm going to find you a doctor in Atlanta where I lived at the time. And so she found me a doc, Ruth O'Regan. She's an amazing oncologist. And she was one of about 5 doctors in the country who were actually researching triple negative breast cancer. So she put me on some drugs that were then experimental for TNBC, now are our standard of care, but they were experimental. She said, let's try them. I don't know if they're going to work, but we could try them. So I did a lot more chemo, and I didn't die. It's been 13 years. So I know that God left me here to do this work. I see so many people who had or have what I had and aren't making it. And so I'm very blessed to be here, and I'm a miracle, so I can't take it for granted. So I've been doing advocacy really ever since I was sick or got better, and I've been on the board of the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation. And then as the years have gone by, I've been digging into the data about Black women and finding out what's causing all this bad breast cancer, what's causing Black women to die. And Black women have a 41% higher mortality rate of breast cancer than white women. That's insane. Black women have a 39% higher recurrence rate of breast cancer than white women. Black women, as I said earlier, get triple negative breast cancer at 3 times the rate of white women, and we don't know why. But the worst fact I hate the most is Black women under the age of 35 get breast cancer at twice the rate of white women and die at 3 times the rate of white women, well before they would have that first mammogram at age 40.
Right.
40 is too late for us. And 40% of triple negative breast cancer is women under 40.
Wow.
So these statistics are horrible. So I started digging around, and I'm a marketing person. What do I do when I think of stuff? I write a PowerPoint presentation. So I put all these horrible facts into a big PowerPoint presentation with a lot of sad pictures of real women. And I took them to this conference that's held every year called the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium. And people come from all over the world, all the researchers, all the doctors, all the pharma companies to talk about breast cancer. So I tried to get meetings with all the pharma people, and I took this presentation. I said, what is wrong with this picture? What is wrong? And they were blown away, because even though the numbers of the stats had sort of been out there in the world for a long time, no one had really paid attention to them and put them all into one picture.
Or had looked at them with that lens of race, right?
Yeah. And so they're looking at me like I'm crazy. I said, I think something's wrong with your drugs. Now, if you got this happening and this happened and this happened, your drugs aren't working on these Black people. Like something is wrong. I think your baby's ugly. And I just started talking about it. And so they started listening. And then I said, well, they'll say, well, we don't have any participation in clinical trials. And I said, well, whose fault is that?
Right.
And so then I said, okay, let me understand that better. And I did a research study of Black blesties.
Oh, define blesties.
A blestie is someone who's had breast cancer.
Good.
Right? And really any cancer. We die at a higher mortality rate at any age, any stage, even stage 0, in any subtype of breast cancer.
What?
So I brought them all to the party. And then I did a quant study of 300 women and caregivers and their families. And what I learned was 2 major factors. First of all, doctors don't invite us to clinical trials. Hello. Doctors don't invite us. They don't invite us for a myriad of reasons, illicit bias, racism, whatever. And the second reason was they say stuff like, I'm going to get the sugar pill and die.
The patient themselves says that.
That's what we feel.
So basically, they have no understanding of how the science works. Yeah. No understanding. But how would you know what a clinical trial is? Yeah. How would you know what standard of care is? That you're going to get standard of care. You're going to get a drug that's already on the market and maybe something on top of it or something better than it or in replacement of it. But how would you know that if no one explained it to you? If your doctor never talked to you about it, how would you know? Right? I learned pretty quickly that if I explained it to them from a voice of trust, the voice of a blestie, in words they can spell, hello, they got it. With analogies they could relate to, like, that Advil you took last week, it was in a clinical trial. Yeah. That heart medicine I gave my dog Harper, it was in a clinical trial. They're like, really? Wow. So when they hear this, how it works, they're like, hey, sign me up. I don't want to die.
I'm so glad that you were motivated to start this, unfortunately through your own story. But can you tell us a little bit about where you were in your life when you got that first diagnosis?
So I was a crazy working mom. My younger daughter was going to sophomore year at Dartmouth. I ran an ad agency. I had 2 partners. Mm-hmm. I think that particular year I had already flown 100,000 miles by September.
One of those jobs, right?
I was one of those jobs. I was the breadwinner for my family, and I was the rainmaker for my ad agency.
Wow.
And I had people like pulling on, depending on me, right? So I literally had put off my mammogram. So my mom had breast cancer. So she was always very, directive about go get your mammogram. And so I kind of put it off from the normal time I would do it, which was in July, because Haley was in China. And I was running around like a crazy person. I'll wait till she comes home. We'll do all the appointments. She was going to be home for a week. So we'll do the dentist, the gynae, all the things. So I did. So she came home from school. And so we go to the gynae, and my gynecologist found a lump on my breast. And they're like, we're going to send you an order to get a mammogram and to get a sonogram. Literally, before I got out the door, I had this order to go for a mammogram the next day. So bam, 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 mammogram, sonogram, biopsy.
It sounds like the work that you were doing at this time in your career could have caused a lot of stress in your life, even whether you enjoyed it or not.
I really believe that stress caused my breast cancer. I really believe it did. And I see it happening all around me and from other women, especially Black women, but I always had something. My body always told me something was wrong, but I didn't listen. So either always have a yeast infection or a sinus infection or a headache or something.
It was escalating. It was like, slow down, and you weren't listening.
So God gave me lots of warnings. I didn't listen because we never listen.
Because we're too important.
Right. And my first meeting with my nurse navigator, which I never knew who that was, but nurse navigators are the best people of the world. They kind of coordinate your care. And she said, Ricki, you are so stressed out. You need to get the stress out of your life. And I said, I'm not stressed. I don't believe in stress. Stress is for wimps. It's a cop-out. Oh, yell me. Like, well, how do you know I'm stressed? And she said, well, how many times a day do you either think or say the word asshole?
Oh, is that the determinant?
And that's my filter now. But I never said it out loud. But in my head,
you thought it a lot.
I called both my business partner of 10 years and my husband of 30 years. With adjectives. That was their name in my head. That's how I referred to it when I thought about it. And I had to realize that my peace is non-negotiable and that I not only had to get the cancer out of my body, I had to get the cancers out of my life, the other ones.
So how'd you do that?
I I divorced my husband of 30 years. Ouch.
Wow.
Well, I quit my business partners. I quit my job. I sold my big house in Alpharetta, Georgia, with 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, the whole thing. And I moved to my one bedroom condo on the beach in Maryland, where I grew up. And
I love it. I love it.
I wouldn't recommend doing all those things at the same time, but I really felt like I had to save myself.
Yeah.
And the only people I could take care of were me and Haley. I had to put my kid through school, and she became my focus. I had to cut everything out and focus my energy. And so really, I started my own business after my 3rd round of chemo, the first time around. And I just was so blessed. And so my first client was Obama. So I actually made all of the Black radio ads for the 2012 campaign.
Fun. See, that's an even better gig.
I know, right? While I was on chemo. But it was an incredible experience. But I mean, that's how I made it through, got Haley through school. And I worked. Like we all
So
do.
it's amazing that while you were being treated, you made all these major transitions in your life.
You know what? I had no choice. I had to learn that my peace is non-negotiable, and so is yours. And please don't wait till you're sick or have a crisis to realize that.
Well, that's why we named our podcast Body Wealth, because we saw so many people chasing the financial wealth. And, I've had cancer a few times too.
Yeah.
And once you get that diagnosis, no amount of money matters. The true wealth is your health. And I'm so glad that you are thriving, you are healthy. But we want to go through that journey a little bit to hear how you picked your treatment plan, who was supporting you while you were getting treatment, especially if you got a divorce tell us.
Yeah, I did. I have such amazing friends and family. I have a sister, and I have 2 daughters, but I had my friends from my whole life came to take care of me. And they knew that I would never ask for help. Many of them didn't know each other. They just showed up. And I never asked them to come. I never asked for help. But every Sunday, somebody would come and somebody would leave for a year.
Wow.
I never
and stay with you.
Yeah, he would stay with me and do a project. They helped me sell my house. They helped me start on my divorce proceedings. One of them's an attorney. They helped me do everything, like even paving the bricks on the front step. And my sister replaced my HVAC system that were full of mold, evidently. And they just took care of me. And they've become such good friends.
Wow.
And we have a prayer call every Sunday night at 8:00. And we have for 12 years. 11 didn't know each other and then just became fast friends. And it's funny because as they became friends and started doing stuff without me, I'm like, wait a minute. But they're all buddies. And so
That's real community.
Love best, but they took care of me. And they basically created a haven in my bedroom. And so they took everything out of the bedroom, ripped out the carpet, the curtains, everything, and made it all white. And I had all white comforters, all white pillows, all white fluffy carpet, all white things. And I felt like every day I was waking up in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And no one was allowed in my room. So you'd have to, if you wanted to come in the room with me, you had to take your shoes off, take your clothes. They were really strict about who could have. That was like my sacred space for chemo.
Had someone else gone through it before then? How did they know what you needed?
We had one friend who died of breast cancer, and she was 48. She was really young. And none of us really knew anything about it then. And her husband was very protective of her and really wouldn't let us help. And they took a naturopathic route, and she died so quickly from eating broccoli. And they tried all these things, and she died in basically just a year because she didn't take drugs.
Right.
And we didn't know any better, and we really couldn't help her. And that was probably at least 10 years before me. So I just became very analytical about everything. And I also had all the help. And, I have 2 very bossy daughters. At the time they were 19 and 26. I just knew that I had to find the best science for me, especially when I realized when you Google triple negative, it says you're going to die, you're going to die, you're going to die fast. If you're Black, you're really going to die. And so I knew I had to find something to save myself. And my doctor didn't have it in her. And actually my doctor went with me to Emory, to Ruth O'Regan, to the other doctor, this other oncologist, to learn. And I tried to choose life in every decision I made.
But how did you find the Emory doctor?
from Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation. I
Oh,
called
that's right.
and
Well, I think it's impressive that your first doctor was willing to go with you
yes,
to learn because she knew that that's something that she needed to know too for future patients.
and it was still such an unknown because nothing works. None of the drugs worked. None of the drugs work for anybody.
But the drug you're taking works for you. So that was an experimental drug at the time?
Yes.
And do you continue to take it now?
I don't take anything. I don't take anything. So, this is the one thing about triple negative is that there are no drugs. We have 2 targeted drugs now that are immunotherapy that weren't available when I was sick. But before that, it was kind of a free-for-all trying anything. And I just was very blessed that this drug worked. And now it is standard of care, but back then it was experimental for TNBC.
So you're cancer-free?
I'm cancer-free. I have no evidence of disease. I go paddleboarding every day. I walk 3 miles to Starbucks. Like, I'm healthier than my children.
Well, they're going to learn from your role model. They'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But it also is a testament to you because I feel like you're a role model to me in just saying, okay, here's the situation I'm in. How am I going to solve it? Right.
How am I going to solve it? Like we do as women, as Black women, as mothers, we say, no is not the answer. It's how.
Right.
So how are we going to figure this out? And my dad used to always say, Ricki, just think harder. Just think harder. You'll figure it out.
I love it.
You got to think harder. You got to meet more people. You got to talk to more people. And so I was very aggressive about it and asking questions. I'm not shy at all. And I just kept saying, okay, what else can I learn? What else can I know? What should I eat? How should I do this? I always knew I was going to be okay. And I used to wake up every morning and say, I choose life. So what do I have to do today to choose life?
Now, your mom had breast cancer. Is it genetic then, or did you get genetic testing?
Yes, so I did, but it's not genetic, but my mom had it, and my mom's aunt had it, and she died at age 42. My mom had it at 50, which is still considered young.
Yeah.
So we don't have any genetic mutations.
That I know of.
What? Those are made for white people. All the genes that were tested for were on white bodies. They were made in Colorado and Sweden and Australia. So I do believe there's something genetic in our makeup for a triple negative. Well, actually, one of the projects that we're working on right now is a Cancer Grand Challenge with a researcher named Dr. Melissa Davis at Morehouse Medical School. And she has been working in Africa for about 10 years and has identified a gene called the WNL gene, which we believe is attributing to triple negative in Africa.
Well, that's great research.
But I believe it could be that. It could be a myriad of things. But the research that we're doing is studying the social determinants of health, which everybody wants to blame it on obesity, whatever those things are. Genetics, genomics, which is the actual science of the cancer cell. And they have those spots on them that could be predictive of a bunch of different things that we're now finding. And then epigenetics, which is the environment. So if you live in Flint, Michigan, or in Cancer Alley in Alabama, all those factors can be attributed to your test.
And it could be environment, or it could be the stress of those.
It could be the stress of the environment. Yes, exactly.
So in West Africa, are the rates similar to African American women?
Yes. And triple negative breast cancer is even more prevalent. So they don't measure the data the way that we do. They don't have the American Cancer Society or, the SEER data, but we have. But all the trends are like that they're seeing so much triple negative breast cancer, so much early onset breast cancer of young women. And so it's pretty epidemic there. Also is in the Caribbean.
Okay, so it's important for us to identify these genetic and genomic things, as you said. When you were sick and when you were in treatment, how did this affect your daughters? I know they weren't living with you necessarily at the time.
Well, Haley, so she was away at school. And so when she came home and saw me in the state that I was in, right after my first chemo, we basically didn't kind of give her all the facts. And we didn't really understand it. Severe.
Right.
When she came home, I lost 30 pounds in like 2 weeks. I was like not in a good place. So she wouldn't go back to school. She stayed home with me. And she was my caregiver for that semester. And now she's my boss. I can't.
She was in training for that.
Yeah, she was in training for that. And she's always helped me with advocacy, but now I pay her to do it. So that's a great thing. But so she really took care of it. And Amanda was working in the Obama White House. And so she was pretty busy. But she would come home every few weeks on a weekend and hang out with us. But she was the note taker at the doctor's appointment. So we'd go on the 3-way call. And by the time we got to the car, she had already defined all the terms, written a whole analysis of what the doctor said, and like had a product for us to read, like a book for us to read.
Okay, so they inherited all of your ways of
Smart.
Yeah.
And so now Amanda, she has 3 babies, 3, 5, and 7, and she just had a prophylactic mastectomy in February.
Oh,
Tell us what that means and why she chose that. Yeah.
Because we don't have any genetic mutations, but we have a family history, we got her a risk assessment. She was too young to get a mammogram. Both of them were, right? And so we got her a risk assessment. A risk assessment every Black woman should get at age 25. Younger if you have a family history, where they basically do genetic testing. They figure out what your family history is, help you understand her story, and look at basically a health review to see what your risks are. So when Amanda first did her risk assessment with my doc, she had a 40% risk of getting breast cancer. And then she had a mammogram. It went up. Then she had a sonogram. It went up higher.
Were those parts of the risk assessment?
Yes. And as we identified that, they would now pay for her to do it because of the first.
So she had to have the risk assessment. And once she would hit a certain level, then they say, okay.
Yes. And anything about 20 is abnormal. So she started at
40.
And so it really was up to like 60 by the time she finished all the testing. And so one of her best friends had just had breast cancer, and she went through the whole mastectomy process with her. And so she helped her out and was her caregiver. And she's like, Mom, I can do this. It's no big deal.
She knew exactly what she was choosing.
Right. So we got the best surgeons and the best doctors and all the things. And she had surgery. She has bigger boobs.
What bigger?
My little fake ones are bigger than the ones try to kill me. So she got bigger boobs. She spared her nipples. And she got a thing called resensation now, where they can actually make your nerves work in your breasts. Well, not in your nipples, but in your breast tissue, in your skin. Wow. And then she has no scars. Everything is like underneath. And so she has beautiful, perfect boobs that won't get sick and will never have to wear a bra or get a mammogram.
That's great. Yeah, I went smaller. After my mastectomy with my reconstruction, I was like, I'm going smaller. Nobody needs all those boobs. That was for me.
Well, I had no boobs. Mine are like a tiny bit bigger. But
even making that decision, I know your daughter obviously saw what you went through and she knew what her risk was, and she had a friend who had it, but it still has to be hard to make that decision.
She gave herself 3 parties. Prepare with her friends. Like she had 3 different versions of a boob party. And she called everybody that she knew to ask, well, how's it going to affect my sex life? She did all the research and everything. And, but she has 3 babies. And so after the 3rd one, her husband had kind of, and he still wants to have a 4th. So wants to have a 4th to this day. But that was sort of her statement. I'm not having more babies. I'm done.
Okay. So how long from the time when she started having that test until she actually chose to have the mastectomy?
We started in June. It took until February. It took until September to even get the risk assessment. And from my doctors, from people that I know, to get it covered. And so they helped us along the way. All of my docs helped us figure it out.
So it's hard for someone to get a risk assessment.
It's hard. And it shouldn't be that hard if you have a family history. Right. So my breast surgeon does the risk assessment, but really, you should ask your GP or your gynae. Your gynae can find you someone that will do it for you. There's genetic counselors and will help you kind of go through it. But you could start with either your gynae or your general practitioner. And, we do what we call BEXA scanning. It's a technology that's been around for 20 years, but they've never really commercialized it. But it's called elastography. So there's no radiation involved. It's a little mouse that you run over your breast, and it identifies masses. And if it finds a mass, it's specifically made for dense breasts.
A lot of Black women have.
Yeah. And then it will do a pinpointed sonogram onto the mass to tell you if it's cancer or not. So we take it on the road with us all the time.
Well, that's something that you can do?
No, we have a technician. We basically raise the money to pay them to come with us to events.
Okay.
So we brought them to Martha's Vineyard in August, when all the bougie Black people. We did a big event, and then we scanned 54 women. We found 3 cancers in 3 mates.
Bless you. You are doing God's work. When are you coming to D.C.?
I know he just did it in D.C. Last weekend at a hair show. So we don't go to health fairs. We go to the ubiquitous hair show.
Places where Black women are.
We go to all the Delta and AK, all the sorority, and Jack and Jill. We go into like just community events and we just hang out with women and say, "You want to go scan?" And so we're doing it this weekend in Atlanta at an event, and we're doing it also in DC this weekend at an event here in DC for creators, for Black women entrepreneurs.
And how do you fund this?
I ask everybody for money. I have no qualms about it.
Okay.
We get most of our money from pharma. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. I'm so blessed for my pharma partners. I tell them their babies are ugly and they still write me checks. So,
They don't want them to be ugly.
and I treasure my relationships with them. They're my friends. Many of them that work in advocacy are actually survivors.
Mm-hmm.
But they're just people that are just awesome people. And I just make them part of my family. I call them my family. And they have been so supportive of our work from day one, from the day I opened the doors. My first supporter from Amgen said, "Okay, Ricki," I said, "I have no money, but I want to do this thing." She said, "Well, how much is your mortgage for the next 6 months? What do you need?" And she gave it to me and said, "Go start your thing."
Thank you, because I think it's a credit to you to make them understand the magnitude and urgency of this problem. And so,
well, you know what though? I'm a marketing person. And so Brenda, I'm all about the ROI. Yeah. I don't do anything without a metric. I'm going to take your money, but this is what I'm going to spend it on. This is what I'm going to do with it. And this is what I'm going to deliver back to you. So when I could go back and say, I found 3 cancers, they're like, hello. But even when we trial our clinical trials on education program, we've now signed up 19,453 Black women for clinical trials in the past 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm proud of that number, but it's not enough. It's not. We need more and more, So, and even our Love of My Girls, Young Women's campaign, under that campaign, we have an HBCU internship program. We have 14 interns right now from all over.
Great.
We've had 92 till now. So where is that now? I guess it's like 105. We do our Love of My Girls campaign, and we do all events all around. We do BEXA scanning. And then Haley does a show called Pink Table Talk. And so on her show, it's once a month. She talks to young women who aren't sick. And so I think we're now at 510,000 young women have seen some aspect of our campaign in the past 2 years. So we deliver the numbers. I use media however I can. So my show that I do every week, The Doctor Is In, we reach 5,000 to 10,000 women every Wednesday. And
that's Facebook Live, right? I've watched that.
Yeah. And people come and talk and hang out with us. And now we just started a new show. We're doing our second episode tomorrow, actually called for Soundbite Speaks, which is about our Africa project, our research project. So it's reaching people in Ghana and Nigeria. We had 10,000 views of people in London, in England, and in Africa and the U.S.
You're giving to a lot of people with the reach that you've gotten and the information.
So you don't do any monitoring now? I guess not, because you had a mastectomy, right? Yeah.
I know. So the one good thing about triple negative is if you make it 5 years, you're less likely to have a recurrence than ER positive breast tissue, which is the most common one and the most Black women are dying from. Mm-hmm. So even though we still represent a big percentage of triple negative relative to all breast cancer, it's still a smaller audience. And Black women are getting it back. They're getting it back. Why are they getting it back? Because no one told them to get a mastectomy. They said, "Oh, you can get a lumpectomy and do some radiation. You're good."
Girl, let me just get on that for a minute, because that was my story. That I had 2 lumpectomies, daily radiation, and then in
Harper.
Less than 2 years later, right, Elaine? Less than 2 years later, it was
that's what's happening.
And I thought, why did I go through that? Why did I go through that to then have to have the mastectomy?
Right. The research about radiation and a lumpectomy was conducted in Sweden.
So we have a friend who's been on the podcast whose father was a breast cancer surgeon. And when she got breast cancer, he was like, get a mastectomy. And she was like, no, Daddy, they said I could just get a lumpectomy, blah, 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 blah. Her father called her doctor. He was like, my daughter get a mastectomy, because he'd seen it too many times.
I've been kicked out of at least 4 doctors' offices, white doctors' offices, when I went with a Black woman saying, give her a mastectomy. My dog gets to get attention on one of the bar. Mrs. Harper. But that's why, because we're under-treating ourselves. When doctors are telling you we're over-treating you, there's no such thing as over-treating a Black woman. Right. And so now we have a validated body of data. That's what I'm working on. That's showing that a Black breast cancer cell looks different from a white breast cancer cell. So that's why the drugs aren't working, because they're not tested on our bodies. And our cancers are different, and we have to act differently for them. The standard of care that we're recommended is not right for us.
Right.
And you have to challenge your doctor every time. And they'll say, you're overtreated. Even for stage 0, we still have a higher mortality rate at stage 0. So you can't play with this stuff. It's serious. And you have to get the best care you can, get the most drastic care you can, but cut the breast tissue off. There's no, get over it.
Especially now, because the cosmetic stuff is good, is much better than it ever was.
I know. I'll show you a picture of Amanda's boobs. The cosmetic surgery now is so good and so much better. And
not that it should matter, but yes.
But it does matter to people. It does matter.
It does
and
matter.
I think, that's one of the things you can do is get those reconstruction pictures out there and show people and talk about the sensitivity.
Yeah, we actually are working on that with my doc, with my surgeon. We're actually building a library of pictures of Black women.
All right, you can see on.
So we're building it. So we're right now building a website for Black women with triple negative breast cancer. It's going to launch in November, and we're trying to make it like the Wikipedia of Black women with triple negative breast cancer. So
hey, can you define triple negative? Because I feel like we've been talking about it, but a lot of people may not know exactly what that means.
So there are really 3 main subtypes of breast cancer. And it's kind of like, if you can imagine that every cell has a little hole in it that you could squirt the medicine into. Okay, that's how I describe it. It's a little portal. So one is based on estrogen, which you know about. One is based on progesterone, which you know about. And then the third one is based on an enzyme called HER2. So basically, all of those cells have a little slot you could stick the medicine in. Triple negative, you have no slots. So there's no place for the medicine to go. So it makes it really, really hard to treat. Okay. And we have targeted medicine for the other 3. So for now, we have 2 immunotherapy drugs for triple negative, only one for early stage and one for third-line metastatic. So we have Keytruda, which is an awesome drug, and Black women are doing great in it, even though they only had 4% of Black women in the trial, because we tried to help them. But that drug is working wonders for us. And then another drug called Trodelvy. So Keytruda is made by Merck. Trodelvy is made by Gilead. And Gilead came into this business. They basically are the company that made HIV disappear. And so they come into cancer, so they bought this brand Trodelvy. But it's only now approved for third-line metastatic, meaning you have to have taken 2 other drugs. It gives you 18 more months of life. That's how bad it is, right?
That's just crazy.
So once you get to that point, it's a crazy disease, and we're getting it in huge numbers, and we're still trying to figure out what makes it different. But all breast cancers are different. And so all of these things were all tested on white bodies, whether it's radiation, surgery, drugs, whatever. We just don't have women in the testing. So that's why it's so important to do a clinical trial. And if you're a Black woman under 40, your best science is a clinical trial.
What do you recommend if someone came to you, a Black woman who just got diagnosed with breast cancer? What would you recommend for her to do immediately?
Well, I'm not a doctor. I just play one on Facebook. But I would say ask for a clinical trial. If you're young, so the drugs that are in trials right now are so good. The science is so good, and they're really the drugs of tomorrow. You may not be able to get that drug for 10 years. For 5
But if their doctor says, "Oh, I don't know any trials that are a good match for you," then what can they do?
Call me.
Call you. Okay.
I have so many people that can help you get one. And also, there's legislation right now that we're working with a couple of Congress people on that allows you to have access to a clinical trial if it's not where you live. Have it covered by insurance.
Wow.
So if you live in California and your trial's in Chicago, you should be able to go there, fly there for free and have it and have what you need. So we're trying to get that bill passed.
Oh, that's great. We'll see what we can do
Yeah.
to elevate, and support that as well.
Yeah, so that can't be a limitation for you. But with telemedicine now, we can do trials so many places. And now a lot of the trials, not a lot of them, but many of them are pills, not infusions.
Right.
So it doesn't really matter where you are. And we have one doc that we work with who I adore, Gregory Vidal. He's in Memphis. He's doing probably the most prominent work on Black women and triple negative breast cancer. He's got the most trials. And he's sending patients from everywhere.
Can you spell his last name?
It's Vidal, Vidal,
Okay.
Gregory Vidal. And he's a wonder, a wonder. He's a force to be reckoned with. And I mean, we have many good docs, but he's just really like on his case. And he knows all of his patients inside and out. His kids babysit for their kids. He brings them Sunday dinner. He goes to church with them.
Wow.
Like he is in the community.
Very special.
The human side, the doctor. Yeah, right. This time has flown by. It's amazing. Your energy is intoxicating. But we're going to wrap up pretty soon. But I want to ask one question. Given all that you know now, what do you do to keep yourself healthy?
I know that my peace is non-negotiable. I dance every day. I paddleboard every day that I can, that I'm home. The weather's in my favor. I spend as much time with my grandbabies and my daughters and my family that I can. And my mom. My mom is 91. My stepdad's 93. And I try to say no. It's really hard, especially if there's patients involved. But I live my best life. I treasure every minute. And I seek order, simplicity, and peace, creating space for my blessings to increase. That's one of my mantras.
Oh, that's
From
great.
Ricki Kennedy.
And it sounds like you work with at least one of your daughters, if not both of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Haley is our director of development of partnerships and programs. And she really is the boss. She bosses all of us around.
I love it. That's why I love working with Elaine. It's so wonderful to work with people you love and trust.
Yes.
It feels a little less like work, right?
And they don't really care what you think.
And they'll see you when you're wrong.
They tell you when you're wrong, and they tell you the truth, and they call you out. And then but also they support everything,
Yes.
Yeah. And now I feel like I can breathe sometimes. Like when I first started doing it, I was doing everything. And now I know, okay, Haley's got this. I'm good.
How do you feel that being a Black woman has affected your experience?
Well, I was always the only Black woman in the room. I worked in marketing. I worked in brand management. So when I went to Dartmouth, the ratio was 10-1. So I was always surrounded by men. When I went to grad school, went to Kellogg, we had 30 women in our class of 300. 10 of us were Black. And so I was often the only woman in the room, the only Black woman in the room. For years in corporate America, I was like hitting that glass ceiling, every time. So I kind of got used to it, and I kind of figured out how to do it.
Yeah.
So I would just figure out their button and work it. And there weren't too many buttons. I don't have to have smart. I mean, I think, but I also stayed on top of my game. I always worked really hard. I always tried to learn everything I need to learn so that my craft could never be questioned. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things I learned this from Carla Harris. Do you know Carla Harris? She's at Morgan Stanley, like one of the top ranked Black women on Wall Street.
Okay.
And she talks about her 3 pearls. So if you think about it, when someone's ever making a decision about your career, giving you a promotion, a new job, whatever, you're not in the room. You could be a piece of paper. Now you could be a computer, an email, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not in the room. So people are talking about you behind your back, making some decision about your career. And so she said, think about the 3 words you want people to describe you as when you're not in the room, and live those words. Right. And so that's why I tell my kids, everybody, like, think about, well, how do you want to be represented? And that's how you live. And that's what people say about you. And my words change every now and then, but they're mostly that I know my shit. Like, don't question my ability. That I will always build a bridge, make a bridge, and find the right people I need to be in my corner and get things done. And I get shit done. My 2 mottos, you can see them right there. My 2 hashtags.
Oh, that's get shit done. Yeah.
And DIS is do iconic shit.
Okay, and you're doing both. And our final question, what do you need from a healthcare provider to feel well cared for?
Love and science. So, I talk to a lot of scientists, and they're so smart. But if you're a patient, a clinical trial isn't about the science. It's about another birthday, a grandbaby being born, hugging my dog, It's about, watching my 3 grandbabies grow up. It's about watching a college graduation, watching a wedding happen. It's not about science. So talk to me like that. I don't want to know about what the drug names are because I can't spell them anyway. But tell me what you're going to do for my life. And I think if you think about the caregivers, the doctors that we work with, they're all rushed. They give you 15 minutes. It's like, take your hand off the doorknob and talk to me. We had one Celeste, she's now passed, but she said, I don't want the McDonald's drive-through doctor's appointment today. I want the Ruth Chris doctor's appointment. I want the appetizer, the cocktail, the salad, all the things. And that's how I want you to think about me. Like, I'm not being rushed out of here. And so it's time, love, and think about, to me, it's following the golden rule. And think about it that way. We don't have health equity, and we're not going to get it until everybody practices the golden rule.
Yeah.
And says, I'm going to treat you like my family.
Practices it with everyone. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with everyone.
This is great.
Thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you. I love what you guys are doing. So let me know when you're doing this, and we'll publicize it. We'll put in our e-blast.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for listening. Want to hear our take on this conversation? Check out our After the Show episode right here. For resources related to today's topic, see the show notes.
If you want to support Body Wealth, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. We'd also love it if you give us a 5-star rating and write a review letting us know what you love about the show.
The Body Wealth podcast shares personal stories to inspire you. It does not constitute medical advice. For that, we encourage you to work with a trusted healthcare provider. We also want to remind you that the views expressed by our guests are their own.
This podcast is dedicated to our mother, Jean Fernandez Barbour, who showed us what advocating for yourself really looks like.